Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download, including my latest, NYPD Laughing in the Line of Duty. I hope everyone's having a good week. I'm going to start off with a couple of news stories from the New York Post. Anti-Israel protests carry flares to march on NYPD headquarters after 150 arrested. You know, this debacle should be laid at the rest of Mayor Eric Adams and the NYU administration. And the mayor has set a precedent probably about 6 or 8 months ago when these protests started popping up, these flash mobs, and they were blocking traffic on the FDR Drive. People couldn't get to the airport. Often they weren't arrested, or if they were arrested, they're just taken to a process center and they're given what's called C summons or criminal court system summonses. So what they'll do is they'll bring you to a process center. If you don't have a warrant, you don't have a weapon or anything, they're going to give you a C summons returnable to criminal court, and I think it's 60 days later you go, you plead guilty, you plead not guilty. It's often a small fine, but you're not being fingerprinted and going through the system with everybody else. So I'm sure a lot of these kids, you know, these rich entitled kids, if they were to spend their weekend with some of these gang members from Venezuela that are committing all these atrocities, I'm sure they would change, you know, within an hour they would want to be out of there. NYU and all these colleges have to ask themselves, is this a place of higher education or a daycare for spoiled, rich, entitled kids? These college administrators, they like to play this game with the NYPD. They want them there, but not to enforce the law. They just kind of want them there as babysitters just in case anything gets out of hand. And they often refuse to press charges for trespass or other crimes until the place almost burns to the ground, which it almost did the other day until they started making the arrests. So then you got to ask yourself, why are these colleges letting these protests and all this nonsense get out of hand? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it's the same administrators. They were doing the same thing as students 20 years ago. They romanticize about this nonsense. And for all their degrees and academics, honestly, they're worthless. They can only survive in academia, a place where everything sounds good in theory, not reality. The funny thing about Eric Adams is, I don't know how long ago this happened, but there's a recent YouTube video of he's sitting on a plane, and a young girl is videotaping this on her phone, and she sees him there on the plane, and she asks him, are you Eric Adams? And I think he nods his head, and then she just starts tearing into him about Palestine, and the NYPD are a bunch of Nazis, and she's just berating him on the flight. And I watched the video, and I mean, you can't help but feel bad for the guy. He's just sitting on a plane, and this woman just comes up to him with a camera and just starts screaming at him. But then, to me, that brought up more questions than answers, because I'm saying to myself, well, he's the mayor of New York. Again, I don't know when this happened. The video just went up the other day. I mean, this could happen 6 months ago, then I stand corrected. But if this happened the other day, I'm saying to myself, well, why is he going to Miami with all this stuff that's going on in New York? That's number one. Number two, and I know this for a fact, whenever every mayor in New York City gets a protective detail, there's usually several detectives that go with their family no matter where they go. So I remember when Mike Bloomberg was mayor of New York. Now, Mike Bloomberg was a wealthy man. He had a security detail of NYPD detectives, and they went with him everywhere. I mean, he had properties on islands, and he would fly them, these detectives, to go with him to protect him. And Rudy Giuliani had a bunch of NYPD detectives with them. In that video, it appears, from what I see, I could be wrong, but it appears Eric Adams is sitting on the plane by himself, and none of his detectives are getting involved. And so it struck me as odd. If he was flying by himself, it raises more questions than answers. So the second story is, man suffering from possible overdose, rolled in chair from an apartment left to die in the back of a pizzeria. 2 people were caught on camera pushing a man suffering from an overdose in a rolling chair to the back of a Staten Island pizza shop, where he was found dead Sunday morning. Law enforcement said that the duo returned a short time later, only to retrieve the chair as the man was found laid face up on the ground. Shooting gallery or wherever. They don't want him there. They roll the dead body out, and they put him in back of a pizza parlor. Then they want the chair. They come back from wherever this place is. They dump the guy out of the chair and take the chair. And this is sad. I mean, I've said this on other podcasts. When I was a kid growing up in the Bronx, Staten Island was like really nice. We used to think of it as the country. There's only two ways you can get there: that Verrazano Bridge, where you got to pay $7 each way, or the Staten Island Ferry. And we would go out there like when we were teenagers. We just found it fascinating how nice it was as compared to where we live. So it's really sad that the scourge of drugs and poverty has made its way out to Staten Island. I'm really sorry to hear that. Now, this story is wild. Ex-school cop on the run after allegedly killing teacher ex-wife. Then he murdered his girlfriend, and then he had abducted his kid on the day he was due into court for a case of child rape. Talk about a busy day. Police are frantically hunting for Elias Hunzer, who say is armed and likely to commit more crimes, you think, after he was accused of carrying out the double slaying on Monday, then fleeing to possibly Mexico with his 1-year-old son, police said. Well, by no means am I trying to make light of the story, but, I mean, how did this guy, was he able to pass psychological exams to be able to carry a firearm? I mean, they put you through a battery of tests, and they're constantly keeping an eye on you in law enforcement. So how this guy was able to carry a gun, murder his ex-wife, murder his girlfriend, he's accused of child rape. I mean, this guy's going to hell no matter where. If these things are true, the guy is going to hell. I mean, I can't think of someone that committed so many terrible crimes in such a short period of time. This one has nothing to do with crime, but this is my mindset on travel. Tourist plunges 250 feet to her death in active volcano while posing for a photo. The woman, identified as a 31-year-old Chinese citizen, Huang Liang, and her husband were on a guided tour of Jen, a volcano park in East Java, when she tumbled into the crater Saturday. Okay, this is why I don't like to travel. I really like to stay in my lane along the highway of life. And I know my limitations. You're not going to find me running with the bulls or dancing with the stars. I have I put my life in danger quite a bit as an NYPD detective and cop. I have no desire to put my life in peril for a photo op. So this week I'm going to tell a couple of embarrassing stories of things that happened to me along the way of my NYPD career. Some of these stories are in my books. Some aren't. But I just figure I'd share a couple of things. Let's see. So we've all had embarrassing things happen to us. We've all walked out of the bathroom with our fly open, or that tail of toilet paper that comes following you out of the bathroom until one of your friends is hysterical laughing and steps on it and then tells you you're an idiot. Most of us won't talk about it, but I will. So I've been embarrassed my whole life. And as far as my NYPD career, it started early when I was a rookie cop. And I'll never forget, I had probably about a month in as a rookie. And, I'm starting to feel my oats. I'm a little more confident. I know how to listen to the radio now. I'm not as standoffish with people when they're coming up to me asking me for questions. I've got everything figured out. So I'm in a neighborhood. It's a busy shopping district. And I'm walking around killing time. And I said, you know what? Now would be the perfect opportunity to twirl my nightstick, like I see the old timers do. Right now, you never get a lesson from the old timers. They barely talk to you. But I'm like, this is a great time. So I pull the wooden Coca-Cola, and that's a heavy duty nightstick, not the balsa wood ones they give you out of the police academy. The first thing you do when you graduate the police academy, you go to field training. The first thing you do is you throw that little cheap nightstick out. You get a Coca-Cola nightstick. You remove that ridiculous fur collar that comes on your duty jacket. That goes in the garbage. The only person that I ever saw wore it was the Hummer, which was that sergeant. I think I've told his story before. But anyway, I'm walking around the shopping district, and I got the nightstick, and I'm starting to twirl it. And at first, it's doing what I want it to do, and I'm doing tricks with it, and I'm twirling it. And I got a little too confident. And on the upswing, it caught me right under the chin, and I went, oh. And I grabbed my mouth, and that nightstick is heavy. It swung down and hit me right in the balls. So I go, oh, so I got double banged, and I'm standing there holding my chin, and I'm trying not to fall over, right? I mean, guys, you know what that's like. You get hit there. There's that 10 seconds, I guess, where you don't feel anything, but now here it comes. It's like a delayed reaction. I went, oh. and I just kind of bent over to the ground, and I look over to the side, and there's a bunch of people waiting for the bus, working people, and they're all laughing at me. So, again, things happen to you when you're a cop, and a lot of them are embarrassing. Another embarrassing story happened to me as a rookie cop, and this happened a little earlier. I'm probably a couple of weeks in. I haven't made an arrest yet, and I'm terrified of making an arrest, which is funny because later on I go on to make over 600 and been involved in thousands others. But at the time, I was a little bashful and kind of afraid to put my handcuffs on anybody. And I remember one day my field training sergeant said, "Hey, Ferrari, when are you going to get in the sheet? When are you going to take a collar?" I was like, "Oh, okay, boss. I'll make an arrest," right? So what they would do is, in the 4-8 precinct in this neighborhood called Arthur Avenue, they had what these called with these bias posts. There was a bias incident a year or two before. So what they would do is, every day and every night, they would fly out 30, 40 cops and sprinkle us on foot posts all around this neighborhood. So they would drop us off about 3:30. About 11 o'clock, a van would pull up, a police van. We'd all climb in. They'd take us back to the 4-8 precinct where I was doing my field training, and you'd sign out. So about 11 o'clock at night, van pulls up. All the rookies climb in. And the guy driving the van is like the class ahead of us. He's got like 6 months ahead of us. But he's treating us like he's a 30-year veteran. He's got the job all figured out. So while we're heading back to the 4-8 precinct, we're going along 3rd Avenue. And at the time, that part of the South Bronx was all burnt out. It was burnt out, abandoned buildings as far as the eye could see, or just vacant lots where there were burnt out buildings. So as we're driving down 3rd Avenue, it's dark, it's cold, it's January, and he stops. There's a dump truck just parked on the side of the road, which was unusual, but it's 11 o'clock at night. We want to go home, and this guy decides this is the time he wants to investigate. So he stops the police van, and we all get out. We're looking at this dump truck, and here comes this crackhead, and he's coming out of a crack house, like this beat-up building, right? And he's got a couple of vials of crack in his hand, and he's holding them up to like the street light. And then he looks down and he sees like 8 cops standing there, and he goes, "Oh," and he clenches his fist. So we grab him, and the guy with the big mouth, the guy that's got 6 months on, goes, "Well, who wants this?" And everybody takes a step back, and I've got my sergeant's voice in my head, "Hey, Ferrari, you got to take a collar." I was like, "I'll take it." "Great. Where's your handcuffs?" Put my handcuffs on the guy. I take the crack, put it in my pocket. We drive to the 4-8. Now, by the time I get to the 4-8, all my training sergeants were gone. All the rookies leave, and I'm standing there with this guy with a drug arrest, and I don't know how to process it. They don't teach you how to do all that paperwork, where they didn't in the police academy. So now I'm at the desk, and there was this lieutenant who was not cop-friendly. As a matter of fact, he wasn't rookie-friendly either. And, he's a middle-aged guy. He's probably got kids in college or whatever, and he's late 50s, and he has no patience for me. He just wants to do all this paperwork after when the midnight shift starts, and listen to AM radio. And he's barking at me, throwing forms at me, and I got to go to this guy every 5 seconds to ask him a question because I don't know what I'm doing, and he's yelling at me, "Figure it out." Finally, another 2 cops from the 4-8 came in about 20 minutes later with an arrest, and thank God they took pity on me because a lot of times they wouldn't. And they helped me fill out the paperwork and where the forms go and where the drugs go and the whole 9 yards. So what winds up happening is, after you process the arrest of the precinct, you got to take the body, the prisoner, to Bronx Central Booking. So I call for a radio car shows up, I jump in the back with this crackhead. We go down to Bronx Central Booking. Now, we had done a tour of Bronx Central Booking, like with the other rookies. That's one thing. When you got a guy in handcuffs and you're responsible for him, that's another. So there's a line going out the door, going into Central Booking. I got to wait on this line. And I'm by myself now. Like, the 2 4-8 cops left me there with this prisoner. So like any correctional facility, you go into like this little sally port. You open a door, you go in, you got to shut the door behind you. That's the thing with corrections and police things with prisoners. One door opens, one door closes. They don't want both doors open because people tend to fly out the back door. You go in, you shut the door, you look up at a camera, you push a button. They buzz you in. You go in again. You make sure that door is shut. If you don't shut that door, everybody inside will start screaming at me. So you come inside. There's a gate. You pull open a gate. You walk in, and there's a sergeant behind a desk. And I go in, and there's this sergeant. He's got like this black handlebar mustache. Like, he was in his 40s and like a lot of hair. Like most, guys in uniform back then, Their hair was short. He had like a mop of hair, mustache in his 40s. And most guys in NYPD precincts and inside units, when they're in uniform, rarely wear a bulletproof vest because they're inside. The chances of something, and to get in here to kill this guy, you'd have to go through so many layers. But we're in this dungeon, and he's wearing a bulletproof vest, long sleeve shirt. And he's got more ammunition. He's wearing a full gun belt. That's another thing. Most guys will just wear like inside, like a gun on their hip. This guy's wearing a full gun belt, and he's got more ammunition on his gun belt. He looks like he's going to join the effort in the Ukraine, right? And I walk up, and he goes, "Is your prisoner injured or sick?" And I was like, "What? Is he injured or sick?" I go, "No, he's fine." All right. So he goes, "Give me your paperwork." So he starts looking at it. He goes, "All right, take him in the back." I said, "Oh, okay, boss." So you got to go through a magnetometer. You got to take his handcuffs off. Then you got to secure your weapon. You got to lock that up. Then you had to walk through a magnetometer, and then you got to deal with Department of Corrections. So in Bronx Central Booking, well, I mean all central bookings are like this, but I'm just describing the Bronx. You go through a magnetometer, and we have what's called the bullpens, and they're these huge jail cells where you can fit like 50 people. I mean, not comfortably, but you could realistically, you could put 50, 60 people in there, right? So I walk in, and I've got a manila envelope, and they're like, "All right, take off your shoes." The guy takes off his shoes. They take off his shoelaces. They take off his belt. They put it in there so he doesn't hang himself. They're really, I mean, they're so thorough in corrections. They put him in the cell, like, "Okay, he's lodged. Go to pre-arraignment." And I'm like, "What?" They go to pre-arraignment. So they bark at me, right? So I take the paperwork, and I go into this room of pre-arraignment, and there's a bunch of cops waiting at this desk, and they're filling out paperwork. And now it's my turn, and I go up. I don't know, there's like 10 forms, and each form is for each different type of arrest, and I had never done this before. So apparently I'm holding up the line, and now everybody's no one's helping me, but they're yelling and screaming and complaining. The next thing I know, in comes walking that sergeant I was telling you about with the gun belt and all the ammunition and all the toys, and he goes, "Ferrari, again? What the F is the matter with you?" And I'm like, boss, he starts snapping his fingers at me. He goes, "Come on." Then he starts clapping. He goes, "It's North America 1988. Come on, get with it." He goes, "What do you got?" And I says, "A drug case." And he just starts grabbing all these forms. He hands me. He goes, "Fill these out, throw them in the basket, and go see a district attorney." I was like, aye, sir. So I take care of that, go in the back. I write up the drug arrest. I didn't get home till like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's not how I wanted to spend my day, but that's how my first arrest went. So probably about 6 months later, I'm starting to figure it out. I'm starting to make arrests. And, I'm getting a little more confident in who I am and what I'm doing in my NYPD career. And I'm off duty, and I go to this gym, and I'm dating myself. It was the Jacqueline Lane on Tuckahoe Road in Yonkers. And I'm working out, and all of a sudden, at the corner of my eye, I see this guy coming by, and he's wearing like the $6 Million Man, like that red jumpsuit with the white stripes on there, Lee Majors used to wear. And he comes walking over to me. He goes, "Hey, Ferrari, you know how to use that machine? What the hell is the matter with you?" And I go, "Oh, boss, how you doing?" He goes, "I'm doing good. How you doing?" I said, "I'm great." I says, "I appreciate your help." And he goes, "Listen, kid," he goes, "I'm sorry I was hard on you that night." He goes, "But it was a busy night." And he goes, "I was close to retirement and getting quite ornery." So I actually struck up a friendship with this old-time sergeant. He had just retired. I wonder if he's still alive. Jesus, he would have been in his late 40s then, and that was 1988. I hope he is still alive because he was a really nice guy, and he was quite the character. And I miss guys like that because it's the characters in the NYPD that really made the job special. You know what I mean? You didn't take things personal. And I'll tell one more embarrassing story. So it's the early 90s. We have this robbery pattern going on where gypsy cab guys are getting ripped off. So my partner and I, it's towards the end of our tour, we're circling the precinct like buzzards, waiting to come into the station house. And I see a gypsy cab go by, and there's 3 young guys in the back, and one of them is hanging over the front seat, like with his head near the driver. So I told my partner, I go follow that cab. He goes, "Come on, we're almost at the tour." I go, just follow that cab. I think he's getting robbed. So the cab knows we're behind him, right? So you think he's going to obey the traffic law. He burns a red light. So we put the lights on, and now he starts burning red lights. And so now we're chasing this cab. He gets stuck in traffic. My partner and I jump out, approach from the back seat, guns out, And in the back seat, you got 3 young guys, and they're passing a shopping bag around. It looked like a hot potato. And we're watching the bag pass around. They're like throwing it violently. And finally, the bag rips, and I see a kilo of Coke in it. And like, I thought it was a joke. I was like, are they kidding me? So we pull open the doors, take these guys out at gunpoint. I call a 1013 over the radio, right? Supervisors start showing up, holster my weapon, put these guys in handcuffs. There's 3 guys in the back seat with 4 kilos of Coke. Like, what's better than that, right? So I bring them into the station house, and like, I'm on top of the world. I'm parading around the station house like I won the Stanley Cup. I'm holding the drugs out. Everybody, where did you get this? You're going to narcotics. Everybody's blowing smoke up my ass. I'm like the happiest guy in the world, right? I'm taking photos with this stuff. So our supervisors, the NYPD is paranoid about corruption. 2 of our lieutenants, both of went on to become chiefs. They took the drugs. After I was done with all the paperwork, they sealed it up in a box. They signed it out, and they brought it down to the lab. Not taking any chances. You don't want to leave something like that laying around the station house. Not that something would happen to it, but if something did happen to it, heads were going to roll. So, okay, got 4 kilos, blah, 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 blah. Now that night, I had to go down to Bronx Central Booking and process the arrest. So I go down to Bronx Central Booking. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And that neighborhood, it's a rough neighborhood. And like, once the judges have done banging their gavels about 4 or 5 o'clock, the neighborhood around Bronx Central Booking becomes a ghost town. And there was like one diner that used to stay open late, but it was like a greasy spoon. But they had just opened up a food court, like a little shopping center across the street. It just opened. I said, all right, great. I'll go in there. I'm sure they have things. So I'm like, before I write up this arrest, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to get something to eat. I go across the street, go inside, and, I had like a Manchu wok or something. There was a Chinese woman trying to offer me bourbon chicken on a on a toothpick. I like, pass. And they had this little Italian restaurant. I'm not going to say, but it's a chain. So I ordered myself a chicken parm and a side of spaghetti. I'm still in my uniform, right? The food court is basically empty. I sit down. I'm eating. And I'm just like, I'm on top of the world, man. I'm looking at the Polaroids I took of the kilos. And, it's like, this is great. It's like everything I ever wanted to do, in my NYPD career. I'm doing it, right? I'm eating this big, heavy meal. And I've had problems with my stomach my entire life. The next thing you know, I'm like, ugh. I'm like, oh, man, I got to go. Like, now. So I'm weighing my options. The bathroom across the street in Bronx Criminal Court is like a dungeon. Okay, there's often no toilet paper. It's disgusting. So I said, all right, you know what? This food court is brand new. I'll bet you they got a new, brand new bathroom, right? I walk in. It's like a cathedral. It's antiseptically clean because the place had only been open a week. No one had gotten a chance to like write graffiti on the walls or anything yet, right? So I run into the stall. I take off my gun belt. I hang it on the hook, right? I drop my pants. I sit on the bowl. I'm getting ready for liftoff, and I hear the bathroom door, the front door kick in, and I hear a bunch of teenagers come running in. And I hear them roughhousing and knocking around, and they're hitting the hand dryers, and they're turning on the sinks, and I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah, I'm a cop. I'm in uniform, but, like, my pants are down to my ankles. I'm kind of compromised here, so I'm like, I had better finish up, like, quick, right? So while I'm in this stall, it gets quiet. Like, it went from bedlam to quiet, like, really quick, and I'm saying to myself, Did they realize that there's a pair of legs under here and there's a cop in the bathroom and that's why they took off? Or did they leave? Or something's not right. So I said, let me finish up. So I'm still sitting on the bowl and something told me to look up. I don't know why to this day. As I look up, one of the kids ran into the next stall, climbed on top of the toilet, and he's hanging over the wall, and he's trying to grab my gun belt. And I said, oh, shit. So I jump up, and with my left hand, I'm trying to pull up my pants. And with my right hand, I got him around the neck, like the scruff of his collar. And inadvertently, when I pulled him, what do? I pulled him closer to my gun belt, and he latches onto my gun belt. And I'm like, oh, shit. So now I drop my pants. So now my pants are down to my ankles. I got him with my right. And it's a hockey fight, right? I'm just cracking him, and I'm telling him, let go of the gun belt, let go of the belt, right? His friends run into the next stall, and they're pulling him. Now, those walls, those aluminum walls, they're not meant to hold a 120-pound kid, right? The wall starts bucking, right? Finally, the kid lets go of the gun belt. The wall bucks, right? The gun belt hits the floor like a fumble. I'm more concerned about the gun belt than getting this kid, right? I grab the gun belt, pull up my pants, I'm screaming. I put on my gun belt. I come running out of the bathroom. They're gone. I come running into the food court. They're gone, right? The only person in the food court is still the Asian woman with the bourbon chicken with nobody to give it to. And you got like this 300-pound porter with like a Sony Walkman and one of them floor buffers like they used to do in the gymnasiums and stuff. And he's buffing the floor, right? So I run up to him, right? He takes out his earbuds or, the Walkman thing. And I go, Poppy, did you see a bunch of kids run through here? He looks at me, looks up, burps, and goes, no. So what was I supposed to do at that point? My first reaction is to get on the radio and call a 1013 and start giving a description. But here's the problem. When the cops show up, how am I going to explain this? Had I gone that route, I would have been the laughing stock of the Bronx. So I decided to keep that story to myself because I figured, you know what? They got away with it. I'm not going to embarrass myself because I'd be that guy, every time I go into Bronx Central booking or everybody like, that's the guy that almost lost his gun belt in the toilet over on 161st Street. So it was one of those things where I decided to keep it to myself. And that story is actually that's the opening chapter in my book, NYPD Law and Disorder. And there's a lot more to that story. So, there's a lot of embarrassing things that have happened to me in my NYPD career, and I don't mind sharing it with you guys because it's just part of who I am, and, it's just a part of my life. It's just a bump in the road. So I appreciate for you guys even listening to these stories. As always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my friends in Nairobi. Now, here's the thing. When I saw Nairobi on the Buzzsprout thing of cities that have been listening to my podcast, I'm like, Nairobi? Isn't that where, like, Indiana Jones is always going to get the Ark of the Covenant or digging something up, and then he's, fighting it out with the Nazis? So thank you, Nairobi, whoever's out there. Palisades Park, New Jersey, where they used to have the amusement park. Honolulu, Hawaii. Austin, Texas. New Hyde Park, New York, home to the famous Dublin Pub. Great bar. I don't know if it's still in business, but it was a lot of fun when I was there. There's a friend of mine, his name is, he's a legendary NYPD detective. I mean, I was a detective. This guy was legendary. His name is Detective Frank Pergola. He was involved with the, if you ever read that true crime book, Murder Machine, about Roy DeMeo and all those guys that were committing those homicides. He was also involved in the Son of Sam investigation. Fascinating guy. I just talked to him the other day. I'm trying to work something out to get him on this podcast, but he's got his own podcast. It's called Detective Frank Pergola, Pergola. I really suggest you go out there and support him. He's a great guy, and he's got a lot more cooler stories than I would ever have. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background and would like to be a guest on the show, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. If you enjoy the content, please check out my Amazon author page. Type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free, including NYPD, Laughing in the Line of Duty. I want to thank everyone again for tuning in, and hopefully I'll have another episode out next week. Oh, and I got another Irish Wolfhound. She's sleeping right now, and I don't know if she would wet me if I put her up on my lap. So hopefully next week, if I can train her a little bit, I'll have her on. I don't have a name picked out for her yet, but she's a little rust-colored Irish Wolfhound. Okay, guys, take care and have a great week.